Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today we're talking about video game ratings, also the ESRB Rating Council, and sidebar, the Sega Video Game Rating Board, which existed before the ESRB, because Sega were experimental motherfuckers, and they put ratings on their video games before it became industry standard. So they were very forward thinking in that regard. Nintendo went the censorship route, which it's like, fuck you, Nintendo. Sega's like, oh, we'll give you the blood. We're just going to put a sticker on our game that says, hey, this might not be for 8-year-olds. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to talk about the Sega ratings first. Sega's ratings were G for general audiences, PG-13 or actually I think it was PG-13 or MA-13. I don't. No, it wasn't MA. That was ESRB. I think it was PG-13 or something like that. And then there was mature. Um, I don't remember the specific ratings, but those were the three ratings they had. Basically, it was kids games, teens games, adults games, more or less. Because I remember Mortal Kombat got the PG-13 rating or whatever the equivalent of it was, but Mortal Kombat 2 got the more mature adult rating, whatever the rating was. Now, Mortal Kombat 2 came out around the same time as the ESRB established the initial ratings. So I believe there were some copies of Mortal Kombat 2 that were sold on Sega Genesis that had the Sega rating, and then later editions of the game had the ESRB rating, which would have been M for mature. But I know for sure Mortal Kombat 3 and Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 had the ESRB rating because I had those games as well. And I know they had the ESRB rating. I'm not 100% on Mortal Kombat 2, so don't quote me on this, but I vaguely remember my copy of Mortal Kombat 2 having the Sega rating, not the ESRB rating. But again, I'm not 100% on this. And I know Mortal Kombat 2 on the 32X had the ESRB rating because it came out after the ESRB had already been established. Now, if you don't know, the reason why we have video game ratings in the first place is because a couple of dipshit senators got a stick up their butt in the early 90s when they heard about Night Trap as a video game and Mortal Kombat as a video game. Now the reason why I call them dipshits is because I read the article that they published when they published it, and it I'm not this isn't a direct quote. I'm paraphrasing, but they talked about Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, and they said Mortal Kombat is bad enough even though it's cartoon characters. Night Trap is worse because it's real people. That tells me they never played Mortal Kombat because it was digitized characters. It was real people. It was actual actors. Which, aside from the blood and the amazing lore, that was the draw to play Mortal Kombat initially, was because it looked fantastic with those digitized graphics. We were mind blown because we'd never seen anything like that before. There had been a couple of games that used digitized graphics, but Mortal Kombat was the first one that was good that used digitized graphics. I'm not going to say it was the only one that was good, but as a franchise, it utilized digitized graphics. I will say better than anybody else. You know, a hell of a lot better than Way of the Warrior and other Mortal Kombat clones, and definitely better than the Street Fighter 2, the movie, the game. Ugh, mouthful. Actually, I think it was just called Street Fighter, the movie, the game. But it wasn't based on Street Fighter. It was based on Street Fighter 2, but I digress. They couldn't call it Street Fighter 2, the movie. Well, they could have if they were being accurate, but that would have confused kids and audiences because they would have been like, where's the first one? Which was confusing when Street Fighter came out because we were literally like, where's the first one? And then when we found out where it was and we actually, emulated it to play it because no one's going to pay $700 to get that game on a TurboGrafx CD, which is what it's going to cost you to buy the hardware and the software. Back then and today, Might even be even more today. I don't know. No one's gonna do that. Nobody did. Like 100 people bought the TurboGrafx CD or something like that. It didn't sell worth a shit. Anyway, I'm exaggerating, but it didn't even sell a million units. I don't even think it sold 100,000 units. It was just so fucking inconsequential it doesn't even matter. So we never got. By the time we did get to play Street Fighter, the original Fighting Street, as they called it on the Turbo CD, ugh, it was a rubbish game. We were like, oh yeah, yeah. How did this get a sequel? I'll never fucking know. But the sequel knocked it out of the park. I digress. That is how I know they're dipshits, because they clearly never played Mortal Kombat if they thought it was cartoony graphics, because it wasn't. Street Fighter was cartoony graphics, absolutely. But Mortal Kombat, as kids who played Mortal Kombat knew, was real people, just like Night Trap. Now, Night Trap is one of those games I read about in the magazines, never played it, but never had any interest in it. It didn't look like a fun game. Now, some of the other Sega CD games that turned out to suck, the magazines made them look fun, even though they actually weren't. But the magazines wanted you to think Night Trap was fun, even though it wasn't. And this I'll never understand, because the magazines, and I'm using them, shorthand, they didn't all give it good reviews, but all the ones I read, EGM, Game Informer, Game Pro, etc., they all gave it good reviews for some unfathomable reason, and way more press coverage than it deserved. So this got the attention of a couple of dipshits in Congress who put all of the video game companies through congressional hearings. Smug ass Nintendo dipshit, whatever his name is, was all, this is a violent video game, and they showed off the Justifier light gun. And they're like, we would never allow this on our home console. This is too violent. If this wasn't painted bright blue, kids would think it was a real gun. This is bullshit because, one, the NES was sold with a goddamn light gun. It came with the zapper. And they sold a lot of light gun games. And before the NES, their light gun arcade games and Pong standalone consoles were realistic looking guns. In fact, the Famicom version of the zapper looked more like a real gun than the Justifier that they were mocking in the congressional hearings. So another fuck you to Nintendo, because Nintendo makes a lot of good games. They're run by clowns. Literal fucking clowns. No disrespect to Shigeru Miyamoto, he's a god among men, but like the vast majority of people running Nintendo were dipshits, especially the public-facing people. Aside from Satoru Iwata, who I'm not just saying is an awesome dude because he died. He was an awesome dude. He convinced me to stick with Nintendo through the Wii and Wii U years, even though I hated the Wii and the Wii U. Well, I hated the Wii more than the Wii U. I didn't hate the Wii U, but I was very dissatisfied with it because it was way too much money for what you got, which was literally nothing. Like, at most 7 games. And spoilers, every single one of them has been re-released on the Switch with bonus content and better features and blah, blah, blah. So, another fuck you to Nintendo fans, which is why I abandoned Nintendo and went to PlayStation because, it is better. Do I still miss Nintendo? Sometimes, but not enough to buy their shit. Which is also bullshit because not only did they have a realistic light gun in Japan and had sold realistic looking light guns prior to the Justifier, they had violent video games on the SNES. They had Killer Instinct, which was way violent. Now, Killer Instinct came out a year after the ESRB, but the arcade game was in development with Nintendo's blessing at the time these hearings were going on. Nintendo was already working on their own Mortal Kombat clone. They just didn't want to talk about it in the hearings because they didn't want to be seen as the bad guys, even though they were the bad guys. The reason why everyone had an NES was because Nintendo had an illegal monopoly on the industry, which, spoilers, if you don't know your history, was eventually declared illegal, and that's why third-party companies don't fucking make games for Nintendo anymore, because they've got long memories, and they remember Nintendo kicking their ass back in the 80s and 90s, and they're like, we're good. We don't need your fucking money because we'll get more money from Xbox and PlayStation and PC than we were ever going to get from your piece of shit anyways. So third-party companies wised up to Nintendo's game as soon as they got out from under those illegal contracts. So don't give me that everybody had an NES back in the day as proof the NES was good. No, it's proof that Nintendo's shady business practices worked and they just duped us into buying an NES because there was literally nothing else to buy. But I digress. So after the congressional hearings, under the threat of Congress enacting censorship on the video game industry, which is Nintendo was already doing, which is another reason why third-party companies, especially notably Rockstar, have refused to make video games for Nintendo to this day, which is why there's no Grand Theft Auto on the Switch, and there probably never will be, because the people running Rockstar have said publicly multiple times they will never release Grand Theft Auto on the Nintendo console, because when they were contracted to make a violent M-rated video game for the Nintendo 64, Nintendo censored the shit out of the game, and they were like, fuck you, and walked away. Rightfully so. Which is why when Wolfenstein came to Nintendo, they said, no Nazis, no Nazis, in a game literally about killing Nazis. Whatever. I don't have a lot of respect for Nintendo as a company. I can and do respect some of the products they've released, but not as a company. I'll never respect Nintendo as a company. The same company that sues fan sites, that sues ROM sites, that fucking tried to sue YouTubers. Fuck you, Nintendo. Get over yourselves. It just really pissed me off watching the videos of those hearings and reading about the coverage in magazines back in the day because Nintendo was like, we would never let a product like this on our ecosystem when, one, they already had, and two, as soon as the ESRB came out, they were like, okay, never mind. You can put your games on our system. We're okay with it. And guess what? Lethal Enforcers was released on the Super Nintendo with that very same justifier that they were shitting on packed in. Fuck you, Nintendo. Hypocrites, dipshits, whatever. I fucking hate the 80s, 90s era Nintendo. I fucking hate them. I love the Super NES. I just hate the company that put it out. Or the people that were running the company at the time. I wanted a TurboGrafx 16, but my parents wouldn't buy me one because my sisters wanted a Nintendo because they wanted to play Mario, which I'm fine with. Mario was fun. But I wanted a TurboGrafx because it looked like, at the time, it looked like it had fun games. But also because of Nintendo's illegal monopolistic policies, it didn't get the games. But I'm done ragging on Nintendo. So on the other side of the ESRB and video game ratings is we have the controversial practice of stores not selling M-rated games to minors without parental consent or at all, or cases where some retailers, I'm not going to name names, refuse to sell M-rated video games at all anyways. Now, some of those retailers either went out of business, thank God, or have reversed course and have decided to sell M-rated games now when they wouldn't back in the day. Like I said, I'm not naming names, but there was a time where certain stores didn't sell M-rated games, didn't sell R-rated movies, and refused to sell CDs with parental advisories, which is bullshit. Fuck you. But anyways, once we got the ESRB and the rating system, parents allegedly could make supposedly informed decisions on the video games for their kids based on a sticker. Now, the sticker didn't tell you if the game was any good or not. Neither did the sticker Nintendo put on their games. You know, seal of approval. Fuck off, Nintendo, with your seal of approval. I'm so glad that they fucking dropped that after a while, and I do not want it to come back. Because I don't need Nintendo saying, we have certified this is a good game. And by the way, we're going to publish a magazine where our paid writers who work for us are going to tell you it's a good game. I was never a fan of Nintendo Power. It was sucking on the Nintendo tit all day long, and I was just like, no thanks. I'm gonna play Sega because they got the good games, and I don't need your fucking cartoons or your fucking silly ass JRPG anime bullshit. I don't need that. I want to play real games, which is why I bought a PlayStation 1 the same day I bought my Nintendo 64. So I'm not going to say I didn't have an N64, but it was not enough for me. I had to have a PS1 as well. And this is why I had a Sega Genesis, not a Super Nintendo. Yeah, I'd get a Super NES years later for reasons, but I digress. I've talked about this before. The ratings are just a sticker. It says this game has some adult content or some mature content, and it gives a very vague list of what's in it. Sometimes it's adult themes. What are adult themes? I don't know. Sometimes it's sexuality. What does sexuality mean? I don't know. Does it have women in it? Does that make it sexuality? I don't know. They're not consistent with the ratings. You know, there are some games that should have uh, whatever the equivalent of PG is. E, I guess, E for everyone. There are some video games that should have E ratings that got teen ratings just because they had a woman in them. And it was like, well, we don't want boys thinking dirty thoughts. And this game's got a girl in it, so they're gonna think dirty thoughts, I guess. So, oops, we gotta shield them from that. Fucking conservatives, fucking neocons, fucking Christofascists, fucking Baptists. I fucking hate Baptists. There's not a creature on this earth I hate more than a fucking Southern Baptist. Jesus fucking Christ. I'm gonna have to do a whole video on that. Anyways, the video game stickers don't tell you anything about the game. They just keep kids from playing games that they're gonna play anyways. Or they keep parents from buying them games they're gonna play anyways. They're gonna go to their friend's house. They're gonna rent them. They're gonna get them off of. They can just download games anyways, and you can put stupid ass parental controls on your game console. Kids are smart enough to figure out that you're using the last four digits of your social security number as your password or their date of birth. Kids aren't stupid. You really think my parents put parental controls on our TV back in the day, on our cable box? Do you think that stopped me from watching R-rated movies on HBO? Think again. Parents aren't smart. Kids are. I'm just saying. I'm not a parent, but I know we were smarter than my parents, and I'm pretty sure kids today are smarter than their parents, especially conservatives. And when I say conservative, I'm talking about redneck Christofascists, not necessarily people who vote GOP or capitalists. Although I have problems with capitalism, I understand you have to function within the society we exist. So I don't begrudge people for taking advantage of capitalism to make their lives better. I don't. Because I would if I could. I'm trying my best. You know what I mean? But I digress. This is kind of a ranty video. So, what do I think of ratings? I fucking hate them. They shouldn't exist. They're stupid. They tell you nothing about the game. And sometimes they're arbitrary. Sometimes they're vindictive, and they can definitely be political or politicized, which I hate, So, whatever. I'm not a fan of the ratings. And I'm not a fan of the ESRB at all. So, I wish that and the ESA as an organization would dissolve. Just go away. We don't need the ESRB. We don't need the ESA. Just go the fuck away.